Welcome everyone to the Ace Show. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm David Shoup. I am the host of this wonderful show, and the purpose of this is simply to help professionals succeed and thrive both personally and professionally. And this is where I get to showcase experts in their field, or I like to call them aces in their field, to leverage that knowledge that they have to support. These are business owners. These are founders of companies. These are heads of organizations. They are CMOs, CFOs. They're creative people. They're digital marketing. It's such a great group of people, and they're here to help support this community and support you. And I get to introduce you to Alan Smolinski, currently principal consultant of the Channel Method, his own company. I can't wait to talk about that. Previously worked with a lot of the tech companies like Databricks, Tableau. Also, you worked with T-Mobile for some time, a handful of other things. Graduate of Washington State University, go Cougs. I'm not a Coug myself, but I'm a fan of Washington schools. Spent 6 years volunteering and fundraising for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which I can't wait to talk a little bit about. Father of 3 kids, a fellow summiter of Mount Rainier. Yeah, that's cool. And then, fun fact, in our conversation earlier, I found out that you grew up in SoCal, and then you had a chance to meet a ton of celebrities. And as an actor, I spent time in New York. I got to meet a handful of celebrities, but you met one of the guys I had just wanted to meet my whole life, Jim Carrey. You met Method
hmm
Man, you met David Spade, so I imagine you've got a ton of fun stories around that. um,
Tons of funny
yeah,
stories.
cool. And so everyone, as you're listening, be prepared, right? So this is you're going to get a fresh perspective. Alan has a different level of skill and background than any of the previous people on our show, so I'm excited for his input. Be open and willing to kind of take action on some things that might be shared that's going to be supportive for you. I know that there might be some strategies, some ways to approach your life and business that you can apply to your personal life, to your business. So be looking for ways to improve. And with that, welcome, Alan. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thanks, David. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, we were chatting just a little bit before, and I was like, "This is good stuff." Hold on, let's wait. Let's get the recording going. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Alan. Where are you from? Where you are now? How did you get to kind of where you are in your business, in your career, and then we'll see where this all goes.
Yeah, so I think the thing that's really interesting. So I'm a first generation American. So I grew up kind of in a different cultural household. Born partially raised in Chicago. I've moved around the states quite a bit. So, but I've been in Washington State majority of my life. So I'm Seattle, Washington. I'm proud of this location, which is why I'm wearing the
And I got
hat.
the Mariners hat, so we're definitely repping our state.
I know, I love it. There might be some pushback, those Northern Californians, but
That's all right.
it's okay. Yeah, so I grew up in a family business, and we created a lot of tchotchkes widgets. So the focus was around lap stand screw rods and frames for cross stitching. So if you think of grandma when she had the little round loop,
Yeah,
right? We want to eliminate that for the basically the hobby, and because it was like a lot of older people have a hard time with carpal
yeah,
tunnel and
yeah.
wrist injuries and things, and so they would always have to hold on to it. So we made and we invented a framing structure that could sit in their lap or it could stand alone, and they can do their cross stitching and weaving. So if you kind of think about it, so it really eliminated some problem statements for the hobbyist in the embroidery space,
Huh.
and so it was a lot of fun. But we worked long days. My primary function there was the technologist, and so I obviously worked with CNC machines and robotics. I loved all that. Really got into IT and information systems. I supported my family's business with that. Got into schooling, and I wanted to really focus on the information system space. And then that kind of got me into really the data analytics
Yep,
also
yep.
arena, and a
That's where
lot of
we
that.
met. Is at that point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was gonna wear the data hat because I have my Tableau hat, but I figured, since you got the Mariners hat, I would just represent with
Yeah.
Washington
No, I
State.
like it. I like the teaming in this one there.
Yeah. So, went through schooling, ended up, focusing on the MIS, information systems, again, data analytics. I wanted that to be kind of the core and base of everything that I did, because I came to find by having the right information, by having the right decision pathways, you can make the right decisions. And it doesn't happen all the time, but use case example of this is, my family's business. My family's business was about 95% from one distributor, which was the Michael's Hobbies and Craft Stores.
Okay.
And so when I was going through college, good old marketing class, right, you start realizing that a diversified portfolio is a very happy portfolio. And so that's kind of what I brought to the table at the family business, is kind of say, well, this doesn't make sense. 95% of our business is based on, this one retailer, and they happen to be a partner of ours, a distributor, right? And that got me into partner ecosystems, but it also became these aha moments of realizing when you have a business, you can't get stuck to one type of a portfolio. You have to start looking at other means and how you're going to expand that business in other means. And so for me, the natural fit was the partner ecosystems, was to start to look at other distributors across the world, right? And that got me into partner ecosystems. So I've been in partner ecosystems for 20 plus years because of that start in that family business. And so graduated, landed, and had a phenomenal opportunity at T-Mobile. Met amazing folks there, worked with some amazing folks. T-Mobile at the time was in a challenger space. And I loved that. I love being in a builder. I love being in the challenging space, because when you're a challenger, you're having to fight that uphill battle, which some folks might not like.
And what
But
you were
that
challenging guys like, what you were challenging like Sprint and Verizon, or was it
Correct. Verizon and
AT&T?
AT&T were
Yeah,
were the big dogs.
yeah.
They're the ones who really owned the bandwidth,
Hmm.
right? And they just had such a deep and historical relationship with customers that they were just embedded. And, as you're aware of, customers are really hard to get by, get to, and have and establish that trust to where you can land those customers. Things have evolved now, from a business standpoint of view. So I think that that's really interesting. But that kind of led me from one organization to another organization, is really to diversify my portfolio, my personal portfolio,
Hmm.
right? Not just sit in data analytics, not just sit in partner ecosystems, but it got into sales operations, it got to revenue operations. I started getting into program management. So the evolution from my schooling to what I am now, as I think most individuals, it comes in that pathway of having different opportunities, and taking a hold of it and running with it. I mean, some of the opportunities that were presented to me, in my prior workplaces, were ones that I was very thankful, and had tons of gratitude for those individuals who've provided me. So I think that was great, and there was a lot of learnings along the way too. I think sometimes it was just hard to discuss for us personally, sometimes, is those failures, right? So I had successes and I had failures, and I think that all that became a learning opportunity. How to better myself in my skill sets, and then how do I better myself as an individual as well. So what makes up Alan today is folks like yourself, right? And folks like Nate, who you had on the call. I was really thankful for Nate for a variety of reasons, right? And I don't know if you remember the statement, but he said, be like a duck on a
That's
pond,
right.
right?
Yep.
Right. So cool and collective up top, and paddle underneath.
Yep.
You know, exactly. And I think that's so important to each individual, because I think, I've had prior failures from not being that duck on the pond, right? You can have this eagerness and this passion to go and get something done, but sometimes that means that your feet are up in the air, right? You're upside down. But that gave me these stepping stones into really, and having a desire of being an entrepreneur, and really being, you know someone who can come into an organization and see the very vast landscape that exists within an organization, from legal, all the way from legal to CS, post sales, and all the different minute little different departments and silos that exist within organizations. Because one of the fail points that I've seen at organizations is this very defined silos, and then everything's boxed up.
Mhm.
So to kind of come back to who I am as a person and professional, I do believe in evolution. I do believe in this aspect of being very robust and diverse into how you're thinking about things, and being very open-minded to how different solutions may look, right? I think sometimes methodologies are so hard prescribed that was something that I kind of wanted to get away from, because to me, there's no one size fits all. There's how do we have the right fit, right? And so that kind of led me to a space of becoming my own entrepreneur, really focusing on the entrepreneurial
And
piece
this
and getting
is
into
and this is where the channel method comes in then, right? Which is
where
your
the
company,
channel.
right? So I feel like we've already learned a little bit about kind of how you got, I mean, with this kind of diverse set of background and experiences and the different kind of organizations and different uh, teams within an organization that you've been able to touch. Tell us a little bit about what the challenge method, the channel method is, or what it does. Like, and I can't wait to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I provide fractional business operations services, and as I stated, that's pretty wide, right? I think some people are like, "Well, what are you really solving for?" Well, one of the biggest things I help solve for is this what I'll call a handoff process between the siloed groups, right? Being able to understand the business to end, rather than just saying, "Okay, I'm 100% subject matter expertise in marketing," right? I think the problem is this cross-functional opportunity, right? And I think that's where there's a major break within organizations. They don't understand their current state. They don't fully understand how they're interconnecting between departments and projects and programs. Really being able to bring in the right frameworks and establish what I'll call the right methods for the organization. So I help solve those gaps for organizations. And so again, when we talk about use cases and different problem statements, it's everything from spinning a program from zero to a certain place, right? $1 million in ARR by the end of the year, or let's increase the opportunities by 4x, develop up those sales programs. Let's identify what is the current state, or what kind of right tool sets are we using, or what kind of automations do we need to start driving better value add for the organization. And I think that's a space that I'm getting deeper into, is AI automation and automation for those organizations. So it's not just about the tactical aspect, it's taking the strategy, right, and the business execution, and combining them together, and really solving for the problem statement, not only at that specific level, but across, different
When
departments.
you,
So
who do you talk to? Like when you want to, like, how do people, how do you get with embedded into an organization? I guess is the question. Like, how do you get in to understand? Let me help you. Let me help this company. Who's your ideal client? Might even be a better way to put that question. Like, who do you start
yeah,
with?
so
Do you start with the RevOps leader? Do you start with a CMO? Do you start like who do you start like enablement, or is it all of the above? And yes,
actually, for me, I think chief of staffs are one of the best prospects for me, because they have to understand the business, and they're really supporting the CXOs. And if you think about what they're doing within the business, they could have a variety of different problem statements that they need to solve. And again, one of those is the cross department issues, right? Being able to drive better collaboration. I mean, it's a consistent thing that I often hear, as far as a point of feedback. We're under resourced, we are under budgeted, we've got all these initiatives that we want to execute, and we're a heavily siloed environment. And then when you start talking about that, that still exists even in small businesses. You know, you can have multiple partners, or as a organization in that which is in a startup phases, they're building out their departments, right? Their OD, their organizational development structure. They don't really know what what they need to do and what they need to execute on. So then they're looking at their investors, they're looking at other folks within the organization. So I think chief of staff COSs are a really good prospect. And then I'm typically in the SMB and mid market space. So for me, but at the same time, I touch on a lot of startups. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in startups, especially when it comes to RevOps, right? I think that those are one of those areas where they're trying to figure out if other people can kind of do the work, and those folks might be able to do part of the work, but then they come to recognize like they don't really know how to interconnect everything,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
Um, and so then the next conversations really end up with those who are COOs, or operations leaders, or someone who might be in marketing, because sometimes operations ends up in marketing. So those are individuals that I may have conversation or pinpoint from that standpoint of view, but it could be anyone. It could be a CEO, it could be someone who is doing the work and who's struggling with a problem statement, and then it rolls up, right? And then I end up having conversations with the manager, or director, and then eventually it goes to a CXO. So then sometimes it's in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversations aren't specific. I think that often in the field you hear like you really have to drive and focus on a specific individual. And I don't think in small businesses, and especially in consulting, that works all the time. You identify those champions, and those champions could be, someone who's just doing the work, right? They're doing the hands-on stuff, and then other times it is a leader, or it's an advisor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those advisors are a lot of times key influencers into those organizations, especially for startups. And once you start getting into kind of mid-market, or someone's kind of transitioning, yeah, that's an area as
So
well.
you get to chief of staff, right? You get to you said then the COO would be a good person probably.
Hmm.
How do you help? I mean, your job is then, I guess, help them realize where their gaps are, or where their issues are, and then how do you like? What's the solution to that? Oftentimes in this situation, right? I mean, I think enablement is a
Hmm.
silo, right? Then you've got marketing is a silo, and then you've got HR is a silo, and you've got the dev team is a silo. But I think what a good sales enablement team does is like brings all of them in and makes sure, I mean, I think of when I was doing onboarding, right? I made sure I was connected with the HR so that everybody had all their computers and everything. I also make sure that the marketing team knows that they can give them all the branding material. I mean, all these little pieces. That's a small scale, but how do you bring them together, or how do you get them to realize it and then bring them together?
Yeah. Uh, I think this is where the data analytics come into play. It's something that I've noticed isn't utilized very well. It's either underutilized, misused, or misrepresented. And having the right information, I think you have to really gather as much information as possible, which is really identifying the current state. And I can't tell you how many times having conversations with organizations or people in organizations, and I would say over 80%. And I know, remember one time that I was reading some statistics on this from the other bigger consulting organizations, and they said something like over 70% of organizations don't have their current state. No one can really talk about their current state. And that's crucial. That's crucial because that's going to help you identify how well you can kind of speak about the business from the beginning to the end. Then that's going to help you identify where your gaps are at, right? So then you can say this is a structure that we can work from, or no, this is not good, it's not going to fit into our product fit, it's not going to fit into our organization. We'll continue running business as is, but we're going to go and build out a whole new framework, so then we can eliminate a lot of these massive gaps that exist within an organization. right? So the conversation around frameworks really starts coming into play after really identifying what the current state is. And one of the funniest parts is that when you start interviewing individuals from different silos and groups, you will come to find that there's a partial overlap. That the conversations are never like 90% or 80% aligned. It's maybe 10 to 20% overlapped. So then that basically means that there's 60 to 80% potential of a complete misunderstanding or misalignment in
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
how
yeah.
they're doing business. And so once you start going through that, then you get to a point where you're itemizing all your initiatives, you're mapping them to OKRs and KPIs, starting to identify where you're going to need to put in work, and then you're going to need to prioritize it,
Hmm.
right? So coming in and helping an organization, just even defining their prioritization, right? You're not going to be able to execute well if you've got 300 different initiatives going on or 300 different tactical things that you need to go fix with an organization, right? So then when I think of sales enablement, right, and the fact that you're having to go reach out to all these different departments to say, how do we get all your nuggets and then summarize it and package it in such a way that it becomes an easy consumable for the sales rep, right? Like how do we become a stronger value add,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
And that's the same thing that I do. It's a hat that I'll put on wearing, thinking about if I need to go train up individuals about this, what information do I need to collect? How am I going to justify it? How am I going to structure it in such a way that those downstream are going to be able to understand it, accept it, and be able to go and execute against it,
Hmm.
right? And that's such a difficult thing to do, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, I think I love right at the beginning of kind of this part of the conversation. You got to get clear as to what you want, what their goals and their aims are, and you can't figure out what the gaps are unless you know what they're looking for and what their target is, and then you're able to based on that. And you said all the data that you use. I mean, data. Yeah, you're right. Nate would be excited about this conversation about data and using all that data. I your brain, you got like this big brain. Like I've got this smaller brain. I'm still trying to process all the stuff that you're talking about. I'm really good in that small silo, right? And so you have this holistic view, and this is what I admire about some of the leaders who run large organizations, is they've got this big view. But if the team doesn't know that view and they're not bought into it, then you're in trouble. And so I might be talking around all this stuff. Uh,
Yeah, but that's a weakness for them too, right? I think when you're starting to look at the overarching picture, you're not really understanding what the granular aspects are. You come to a lot of conclusions and you come to a lot of assumptions at that level that might cause you to go in the wrong direction or execute in the wrong way, right? Because if you have a massive cultural issue and you're not sitting there focusing on addressing it, things, such as enablement could become a lot more difficult, right?
sure,
So
sure.
you have the use case of including partnerships, right? So you've got the direct and indirect model within an organization. It could be a massive cultural gap for an organization, right? And so then if your sales field is looking at partnerships as kind of like, it's a nice to have, whatever, right? And they're not executing, leveraging those partnerships, then you're really living in a massive
Uh
gap,
huh.
right?
Yeah.
And then part of that gap could be rooted just from the cultural aspect, right? The cultural spaces, a direct individual might be getting penalized for opportunities with partners, right? As an example, or it could be something else,
Hmm.
right? They're getting penalized, right? The second they feel or hear anything with penalties, they retract, right? It's like a
Yeah.
turtle, they see some sense of threat and fear, and they just,
Right.
they kind of want
And
to.
they pull back in action. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to do that. So yeah, This is cool, man. So I noticed that you are part of, or I don't know, are you the founder of the RevOps co-op community, or are you part of it?
No, no, no.
Okay.
No, I love the RevOps co-op community. It's founded by Matt Walm. He's an amazing guy, super funny. I love what he does, and there's a great group of folks that are part of that membership, and they've got a kind of a very diverse model. But I think what's important for folks to know, if you're not familiar with RevOp communities, it's a really great one to go to because there's folks of all different titles and levels within organizations interacting. And there's a whole series of different challenges that folks are going through. And where this is phenomenal is that there's an opportunity to see what those problem statements are and what those potential use cases are and what those potential solutions and scenarios are, right? And interact with a network who's going through similar stuff, right? If you're in a specific role or you're wanting to get into revenue operations, communities like this are crucial. They're so important to helping develop out the future. And those individuals, such as myself, like I'm always continuing to learn,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so then there could be folks like yourself who hop on. You might not be on RevOps directly, but you might be interested in how do you collaborate better with RevOps,
Sure.
right?
I mean, they've
How
got
do you start?
enablement. There's a handful of enablement communities. This has been a theme, Alan. You are coming in on a, like, I think my last three conversations have at some point referenced the power of community and
Mhm.
leveraging community and using it. And you even mentioned like about deepening someone's opportunity or improving their opportunity by going. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? I think you mentioned something about that. Is like how can being part of a community actually help someone maybe move up in their career or maybe even get a new career position as a result of the community? Does that you find that is useful?
Absolutely. I mean, you got to think about I think there's a lot of folks in roles that are, it's very status quo. And if you look at the statistics around how often people are hopping jobs, it's basically 2 years, right?
Yeah, especially in the tech space, I've noticed that's a not
Mhm.
uncommon.
Yeah, and that could, that could be for a variety of reasons, but oftentimes when I'm having conversations with folks, and it's a lot of focus around their career, right? Being able to get transitions in the next role and kind of getting out of the status quo and how do they evolve themselves. And I think, and again, this kind of goes back down to diversifying their knowledge set. Because you could become a subject matter expert in Salesforce, right? And great at Salesforce. Uh, but what if Salesforce is not something that you're 100% excited about, right? What if you're more excited about the process, right? Of if someone's within an organization and you're wanting to develop a project, right? And develop a project and really solve problems for the organizations. And you're attached to that Salesforce piece is the thing that's really driving it. But the thing that you really love is the project management piece.
Hmm.
Then by actually getting more exposure around project management, you're getting more tied into the thing that you really care about and you're passionate
Yeah.
about, right? So then you're going to want to get into those communities and get more exposure to the challenges project managers face,
Yes.
right? And nothing that's super specific to Salesforce because Salesforce is going to have a very like defined structure, and that could be very different than other technologies or other platforms or other products, right? And I'll just kind of give you an example of this. I was recently having an awesome conversation with a friend who's a very good project manager, and I was asking him to start quantifying and giving me feedback on a dashboard that it built out for a PMO. And the whole reason behind it is because I haven't seen anything like it, and I haven't seen anything produce the type of results that that kind of PMO dashboard did. And the reason I say that is because in PMO, everything's kind of on fire and they're trying to work within a very defined structure, right? I'm working in MS Project, or I'm working in Google Sheets, or I'm working in Excel. And then they get stuck in a lot of tactical stuff. And you go, time out, right? You can automate some of those pieces. But I think you also have to identify how much noise is being created within your processes, because if you've got a lot of projects that are going on and everybody's wanting to escalate to their initiatives, how do you combat that? Like, how do you start, helping individuals understand, okay, I I'm trying to strengthen my career. I'm trying to develop my career. And by seeing, getting exposed to the data is now allowing me to see a bunch of other problem statements along the way. Now, in these communities and these networks, they help you identify and show you or talk about those problem statements, even if you're not experiencing them, right? And so now all of a sudden you start getting these aha moments in these networks that that's not something I've thought about. That's in project management. I never really thought about change management as deeply. I've never really thought about the frameworks that exist in change management. So now I'm going to go and look at change management. I'm going to start looking at, how does that impact the overall process? How can I, again, become better as an individual and execute better? Well, I know that I can use these tools now because the network has been discussing these tools. I know that I can use these processes. I know that these methods work, right? So these aha moments start popping up all over the place, and you're strengthening your career, you're strengthening your professional skill sets, and you're getting a different perspective than what you may be getting or have had in your organizations,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so now think of yourself as an individual. You're a lot more comfortable to be able to interact about the A to Z within project management because you've had this exposure. You're not feeling that lack of confidence of being able to say, I can speak to that, I can't speak to this, right? Or you feel a level of confidence to be able to say, that's not something I need to know. I just need to know who to go to and how to interact with them.
Hmm.
That's right. And so you're not toggling, you're not juggling all over the place, and you're not sitting in this status quo of feeling I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. I don't feel like I'm really developing. I don't feel like I'm really understanding or I'm as confident about that thing that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, because
Now,
you're in this own little world, and then when you branch into communities, you're getting all these new ideas and new ways of thinking about it, and it stimulates that growth. It stimulates some new ideas and creative ways of thinking about it, creative solutions that you can offer to your team now that you've been exposed to some new ideas, some new ways of thinking about.
mhm.
I mean, I've been stuck in something, and literally, it's funny that you say this because I've been joining or been leveraging communities and other experts, not just through the ACE show, but through um, my other projects, and it's just so. I mean, this is so perfect. You're saying this because I am now looking at different ways of running my business because of the value that I've had with other connections and community that I have outside of my own little world. Because I'm work from this computer. This is where I work right here. This is my office
Uh,
every day, right? And so
it's a great
it's
office.
yeah, it looks great. I love it. Anyway, so I love that. Now, so we connected via sales enablement when we were at Tableau. I know that we had touch points, and so there's this RevOps enablement. I think in some cases enablement is part of RevOps, but there's always this. Okay, so the question I'm going to say is how can you help identify priorities that both RevOps and salesmen have to people to help people be in the field to help them be successful. Did I ask that question right?
No, I get what you're saying. I think the challenge is it goes back down to saying how there's a break and silo in departments, and I think we partition our groups way too much, and then there's this kind of weird stack ranking that exists. Sales enablement is such a crucial aspect of generating revenue, right? Because what you're doing is you're empowering and you're enabling sales individuals to become more productive and really focus on the value add and really identify ways to win the deal, right? So for revenue operations, that has to be a priority. That has to be something that's very important because for us, we're tracking against metrics, things such as ARR or usage or, attrition rates. These are kind of key KPIs. And those things, what we're really trying to aim and do is drive better productivity and efficiency. And well, there's a component to it that is so important, which is the sales individual. And those sales individuals sometimes, and I'll talk about data because obviously data is always messy in CRMs, and data is always never set up and formulated in such a way that you can start quantifying or qualifying certain aspects of things. And that's kind of where the power of the sales enablement team comes in, right? You have this aspect of influence, you have this aspect of interacting and working with those individuals. And so based on that, you're going to have a series of projects that are going to need to get executed against. And so for sales enablement, it could be such as we need a new tool, we need a new LMS, right? So then you're working with the RevOps team to be able to say, hey, we need to go and integrate this LMS with the CRM. And we need to be able to go and create these little prompts or these little areas to help educate them. And then that's going to, allow us to go and execute a lot more smoothly, right? Because of those things. So really it's kind of the focus of how do we work together? How does RevOps work with sales enablement? How do we identify what those projects are and then identify the priority? Because we know that we can't conquer everything.
Yeah. I mean, enablement
Right.
is being bombarded with leaders, a good enablement team, let's just say that, enablement team that really nails it in projects, or the leaders are always reaching out for initiatives or things like that. Hey, oh, could you create something? Could you help us? I mean, it happens all the time. And if it's not in alignment with the core mission, the 3 or 4 kind of core goals, we in enablement have to say, yes, thank you. And that's going to have to wait. Or it's going to have to, are we going to shift priorities? Is that because one of these things that we're working on has to end? We have to
Mm-hmm.
pull up, we have to pull back on one of these things in order to make this one. Is that what you're trying to say? Because we can, but these are the 3 initiatives that we have for this quarter or year. This
Mm-hmm.
doesn't quite align with that, and so, but that's the negotiation, that's the discussion that needs to happen between RevOps and enablement and the leadership. I may have went on a tangent, but that just made me think of that.
No, again, it goes, you touched on this. It touches on the initiatives, which then should have OKRs or KPIs associated to them. And then you start drilling down, right? You start talking about what is our capacity to go do it? What's our ability to go and do it? What's the potential ROI if you can? I think sometimes there's a challenge in sales enablement because everybody wants to chase the ROI. And it's one of those things that's very hard to quantify, but we know that it's needed and it is effective, right? And so then when we're talking about RevOps and sales and enablement working together on those projects and prioritizing those projects, then it has to kind of come down to uh, quantifying it a little bit more to be able to say, all right, what's our capacity? What's our capability? What's the potential ROI? How closely does it tie itself to those OKRs and KPIs? Right. And then, but here's another little tidbit and fun opportunity for cross collaboration between different departments. There sometimes is overlap. So those little tactical things that exist, if they're inventoried and if somebody knows the current state well enough, there might be a pre-existing project that is going on where something like that could just get easily tacked on. And I see often within organizations, there's this loss or there's a gap that exists because again, the current state isn't well understood, or someone's just firing off so tactically that they're not looking at the full picture to be able to go, oh yeah, and have the openness. I think that's another thing, the openness to be able to say, I need to go look at my other projects. I think some of these tactical things we could just, plug into those other
Yeah.
projects and put them into the details and the scope, and we'll take care of that for you, right? And it becomes kind of more seamless. And so now you've got some of these more underlying issues where everybody's kind of chasing and wanting some resolution to more quickly, can become more out of sight and out of mind, right? Because they're packaged with something that's already pre-existing. And so again, organizations out there, if you're a leader, if you're an executor, if you're an SME, be open-minded and also try to help your fellow coworker by seeing how something like that could potentially plug into the things that you do.
Yeah.
Uh, it has to get into this space of, by doing that, we're going to establish better trust in working with each other,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's something that can really be a phenomenal opportunity for folks. And I'm probably killing it with the whole bringing up opportunities, but that's something I just want to bake into individuals. There's opportunity everywhere, right? It's just the openness to go and see it
Yeah.
and then know what to do with it, right?
That's great. Ah, man, oh man, I think we could have another show just with all this great stuff. I'd like to pivot though a little bit because we talked about at the beginning. I introduced you had the first off. What are you drinking? What's in there? Is there garlic in there, or what's in that drink there? Is it lemon,
No.
or what's at the bottom there?
So that's ginger. It's
It's
just ginger
ginger. Okay,
water. Ginger. Yeah, it kind of looks
that's
weird.
what I
Yeah.
got. Ginger lemon water in here.
I I should have probably put a container like that, but then someone would have thought it
No, it's a
was an
great conversation.
adult beverage.
Ginger is a great add to, and the lemon I think is a good mix too. My
Hmm.
wife makes that every morning for me, which is just awesome. Before she goes to work, she gets her, and so I drink it, and it's tasting good now.
Yeah, that's sweet. Don't we love our partners for
We
that,
sure do. We sure
Sweet.
do. You for 6 years you were a volunteer for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
Yeah, I don't know if it was 6 years. It was quite a bit of time. I do believe in, I think us as individuals, we need to give back to our community and participate in volunteering. So sorry to cut you off there,
No,
but
no, I agree, and that's one of the reasons why I thought that was interesting because you not only that, but you also volunteered your time for the street youth ministry, and it wasn't just like a one-off. You did these for years at a time, and so I would love for you just to tell us a little bit about with tell me a little bit about what cystic fibrosis is, and then and we can talk about them in conjunction, street youth ministry as well. But I mean, I'd be interested to know what is it, what appealed to you about that particular foundation. I mean, some people have real history, and other times they just volunteer. Let's tell us a little bit of that.
yeah, so that had to, I got brought along in that with someone that was important in my life during that period of time, and their family was directly impacted by cystic fibrosis. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what it was as well, but it's a genetic, unfortunately, it's a genetic disorder that exists, and it exists kind of in a smaller group of people, and it really kind of focuses on individuals who've got maybe a Scottish, UK, Irish background, but it's not specific to those cultures itself. And the genetic disorder, basically what it does is it breaks down someone's system. So it really impacts their immune system. And so there's proteins within the cells that are just genetically kind of dispositioned, so to say. And I may not be the best person to
Yeah, we're not
define
worried about a clinical
cystic
definition, but
fibrosis,
yeah,
but it definitely, it's, there's all these stories from individuals who have cystic fibrosis, and had this difficulty in their life, and they have shortened lifespans. They're having to be very careful about what they eat from a dietary perspective. So I think seeing something that is impacted as an individual so heavily, right? And it's not something that they can control. I mean, there's so many different genetic disorders out there, unfortunately, that individuals are impacted. There's cancer, there's all these prolific diseases and things that are not the individual's fault, right? Um, and so they're in this situation, and whatever we can do to help, whatever I could do to help, I wanted to help. And there's byproducts. So if you think about the medical industry, all this research that goes into the medical space, there's these information sharing, and the information sharing could lead to the potential cures for other diseases and other genetic dispositions. They're all interconnected in some form and fashion, right? And so not only does this better an individual's life, but it also helps define research into how to help mend the gaps and these problems that exist right out in the medical industry. And they're so focused on trying to solve for this specific genetic disorder that they're finding other potential solutions and cures to other genetic issues and dispositions,
Yeah.
right? And
And this sounds like
that
they need a little bit of the collaboration and share.
yeah, no, and I I wish this country, I wish the world, again, from a data perspective, think of how much more we could accelerate um, individuals' health or cures for prolific diseases and disorders by simply sharing information,
Hmm.
right? And these organizations have actually done that, right? The University of Washington, which happens to be a rival, and I don't care. It's okay. They're doing great things. I think the school and the individuals have a wonderful focus, and so what they're executing against, right, is the ability to go and cure and help someone and give them a pathway to a better life and more years in their life so they can have experiences, those around them can have experiences with them. So that's something that I bought into
Hmm.
and I really saw, and that's kind of what got me invested into the CF Foundation. They have a very strong foundation here in Seattle, and the wonderful group of people, strong advocates, great focus, tied with local universities. So there's just a lot of intertwining going on
Yeah.
there. I saw this is something I need to participate
Oh,
in,
that's great.
right?
Yeah. So volunteering, I mean, obviously, I think it not only helps the the people or the victims of these diseases or these afflictions or these challenges or these, right, but I find that it also almost more helps the person doing the volunteering. I feel like when you do that, we're here on this earth to help people thrive, be healthy, be successful, enjoy their lives. And
Mhm.
when you volunteer your time, your energy, your spirit, your love, attention, all of those things really will uh, have an impact on people's lives. And so, I mean, I love that you spent so much time and that you do that volunteer. Your street youth ministry. That's also, I don't know much about that. I mean, that's fascinating too, right? What is your feeling? Like, is that part of? Do you feel like you get a good reward for volunteering? Not that it's about you; it's about the people you're volunteering for. But what's the like? I mean, I feel like we get back more. It really do. We get back more when we give, and we can't be afraid to give. If we hold on to our energy, our skills, our talents, our love, our money, right? Then we're closing off the opportunity to get back more to, I think, anyways, that's where my philosophy is.
Yeah, the street youth ministries, I have a direct, very deep passion around because it touches on youth and youth homelessness. Uh, the group that was there, it was led by a phenomenal leader. He was fantastic with the kids, but thinking about the space, I mean, these were 14 to 22-year-olds that had a whole history of challenges in
Yeah.
their lives, really, and the lack of direction and pathway. Um, some poor part of selfishness, it was a way for me to mature more, and to really, again, when we talk about participating, again, it's not about me. It's this need and this desire to help, right? And help these individuals and and try to bring some hope. Because I think sometimes what I've seen is that there's a massive lack of hope. And if it wasn't hope, it was the sheer attention and the need to be heard and listened to, right? So developing a better skill set around listening and maturing around that, and understanding that every individual can make a difference in somebody's life, and to be there and even do the smallest thing for them, such as, like, take them to a clinic or drive on them, or just be there to listen. I, I mean, I have so many stories of just listening to these kids and their stories and the sense of relief that they had afterwards, and just feeling so deeply impacted by that space
Hmm.
of having, when we talk about privilege, I felt like that was a privilege, the ability to sit down and have those conversations with them, and listen to them, because they haven't been listened to, or they are completely misunderstood. Uh, so by giving back, I think, David, when you talk about that, there is these forms of active selfishness by each of us, right? But the reality is, when you start seeing those little golden nuggets work, the energy that just flows through your body, through your system, the hair on your body stands up. I mean, there's this, like, little tickling that occurs, and little form of excitement of seeing how those little things make a big difference, right?
Hmm.
And it's the compound effect. You give them little nuggets, somebody else gives them little nuggets. Those things will add up, right? And without the presence of that, we can't make a better society. We can't feed into a better society. We can't be a better society. So so that's something that's important to me. That's something from a very vision perspective that I thought homelessness, everyone talks about homelessness. Let me point out something I think is very controversial. I think there's a lot of people who talk about homelessness and expect homelessness to be solved by the government and somebody else. That crap needs to stop.
Hmm.
People, if you want to make a difference, if you really believe that you want to solve something like that, act. Go physically spend your time with these individuals. Go physically figure out ways that you can volunteer and you can participate. Don't, through put giving your money, that's great, that's huge help, but go physically, go do something with these individuals. Be that catalyst of change, because homelessness is not going to get solved on its own, and just throwing money in it is not going to
Well,
solve
that
it,
hasn't
right?
proved to be successful yet.
No. Yeah.
So,
So each individual, right? Each individual, we all have those little golden nuggets of love that we can give that person, and that could be that change form, that change engine, right? And so that's why that matters. And again, I've gotten into these really weird conversations around everyone's expecting everyone else to go do something, and that doesn't. I've never seen that solve anything.
action,
I've not seen the
action is
data
the
prove that that solves anything,
yes,
right?
yes, yeah. Take action. I love that. That's a great way to look at it. Speaking of taking action, How about this segue? You took action and you climbed Mount Rainier, and I want to talk just a little bit about that, only because I summited Rainier too. And I would say it was probably one of the hardest things, physical things that I've done in my life. It was very, especially summit day, was very, very, very difficult. So why did you do? Was it just kind of a fun thing? Someone said, like for me, a friend of mine said, who was going to be summiting Mount Everest. He's like, "Can you go? I'm going to be climbing Mount Rainier as a trial run and a practice run for our summit to Everest. Can you want to go with me?" And I'm like, "Okay," you know. And little did I know the amount of effort it would take to kind of get prepared for that. And so, but why? So why did you do that? Like, what was your reasoning for doing it?
I felt it was a kind of a series of things. In all honesty, I got dragged into it as well. I mean,
You're like, okay.
I got dragged into it. I was doing some hikes up in Mount Rainier, ended up meeting these individuals who wanted it to summit. And I think I really got inspired by this individual as I was hiking up to Muir, that there was this 67-year-old guy that was coming down as I was coming up. And I'm like looking at the clock and going, this it's early. Like, dude, what happened? He was like, "Oh, I already hit the top. I'm just, having riding my way back down." I'm sitting there scratching my head. I'm like, this guy, just having this conversation with him. I found out his age through just kind of like, "Oh, you're already done." And then, one thing led to another, and we started talking, and he kind of gave me a little bit of his background and gave me his age. And then my eyes were,
It makes it even more impressive. You're like, holy moly.
yeah, yeah. And so this individual, I mean, this fella, he did it already like 7 times in that year. And he's like, "Yeah, I typically my goal is about 10. I'll go on a hike up to Muir, and I'll summit it a couple times a year." And he's just like, "That's kind of been my tradition." I'm sitting there just thinking to myself, "Wow, I am lazy. I'm lazy. I I think about just, a 3 mile hike, and I'm intimidated. I'm like, do I really want to go? But then I'm super satisfied the fact that it did go, right? I
Yes,
mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
the difference between, right, the experience and the thought of the experience.
I
So
mean,
this individual, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this fella, he was such a wonderful man, and he was funny too. As I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, if he could do this so many times a year, and he's in great shape, and he's in like great mental state. I mean, that's what really caught my attention. It's like trying to always keep this optimistic and positive mindset. And he goes, "Yeah, it just helps me fine tune my optimism and fine tune my energy. So I'm always focused on being positive." I'm like, sold, sold. All right,
Ah,
I'm doing this trip, right? And these two other individuals I was with, who I met on the trail, we got close. And so like we've got all the gear, we've got everything that we need to do, we're experienced, so they're like, you should join us, we could use a third individual. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." But I'm sold because the whole how I can improve my mental
yeah, yeah,
mental
yeah, yeah.
they they drag me along, and we do some preparation. We do all these like rock climbs and hikes, and a lot of breathing exercises to prepare us,
Yeah.
right? And then also just a little bit of the just in case scenario where the weather turns, and just making sure the gear is right and we've got what we need. We're not overdoing it and we're not underdoing it. So the preparation, I can't take credit for it. It was really driven by those two other individuals because they've had such experience. But where I came in is I came in with that itemized list to say, all right, how are we prepared for our risk management? What's our risk management plan? What's our what's our comfort in eating situation? You know, how are we going to power up, and you know, how are we going to communicate? And these guys are hilarious because for them, they're like ad hoc, like let's just go, let's run with this. I'm very prescriptive, and I've got, you know, somewhat of a structure that I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
doing.
You brought some
And it
structure
was
to
the
the conversation, to the deal. Yeah.
Mhm. And so it brought this perfect symbiotic relationship. All three of us were very different. We had really funny and sarcastic senses of humor between each other. So it made the trip very energizing.
Yeah.
And so that journey, you know, to go from a place where I'm like, nope, I don't think I'll ever hike that thing, to meeting a guy who's, you know, 67 years old and does it, you know, a dozen times a year, to then evolving the mindset to be able to say, it is a struggle. It's a challenge. Do it. Do it. Like, what are you holding back from? Like, you know, you're only going to live once. Go do this experience. You've got the things in place around you to
Yeah.
make it happen. So go make it happen, right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
I love to hear a little bit more on your end. Like, so you got sucked into it too. Sounds like
That's correct.
what
But I was
what
happily sucked in, right? I mean, this is something the
you're always a happy guy.
yeah, yeah,
You've
oh
got
yeah. I mean, I'm optimistic. And I like to try things. Same person that I went and scuba dived for the first time, traveled to Egypt with for a visit to Egypt, and a couple orphanages that we were supporting. So this is the guy that I've kind of done a handful of things with. Triathlon, my first triathlon or my second triathlon, he joined in. Anyway, so all this, it was easy to say yes because he's just fun to kind of do these things with. But I didn't realize the amount of preparation. And I mean, as far as preparation is concerned, I thought I did enough, right? I literally would go up Mount Si, which is a local mountain, and I would have a backpack filled with jugs of water, just packed with water, trying to put, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds in as I was ramping up my strength. I would go to the gym and run, and I would do the same thing on the step machine. And I thought I ate the right food. I bought the chicken, and I did all that prep, you know, protein shake. I really kind of trained, I thought, well. I mean, and then the day of we did a 3 thing because we were trying to prepare like it was a Mount Everest summit, right? So you went to a base camp, set up. Next day we went to another higher up, and then we went to the summit. And everything up until summit day was okay, challenging but okay. I was figuring it out. But summit day, that was a bear. That was so hard. And I remember, talk about attitude. I remembered learning, I think they call it rescue breathing, where it's just like a shh. And I was doing this kind of breathing, what I thought was rescue breathing, but I was adding to it a mantra that I added for my attitude is I'm the best. So I'd be like, I'm the best. I'm the best. And the partners that were with me, because we got paired up in 3s, right? I was in the middle. And at one point during the break, this guy asked my buddy Eric, he says, is Shoop all right? Because he's like wheezing. He's like, is he all right? He's like, oh yeah, he's just saying I'm the best. He's doing his mantra. So I survived all the way up, and almost we got to the tip before we went to officially the summit, and I was spent. I brought the wrong jacket, this huge, clunky, big, fluffy jacket that was not good. I was freezing. They gave me a new jacket over it, and instantly I was like, oh my gosh, preparation's good, but you need to have the right equipment too as part of your preparation. And my equipment
yeah.
wasn't great. I thought I had the good stuff, but it wasn't great. And so, I mean, all these things, I was making a lot of mistakes that I could learn moving forward if I did it again. But I was done. Everybody else was moving up to the top part, which was not that much more, but I didn't think I could make it. And my buddy came to me, Eric. He came to me, and he basically held my hand. He says, "Come on up. You can do it. You will regret it if you don't." I wasn't dying or anything like that. I just didn't think I had it in me. And this is the power of having friends and people who believe in you. Because he's like, he walked with me up, and I did my breathing. I did my, I'm the best, through tears, and I got through the top, and I bawled. I was like, I can't believe I did it. For me, It was really a really challenging experience, but I did it, and I learned next time I prepare more, I bring better equipment if I did it again, right? And I do it with my buddy again, or I do it with another people that you care about that you're teaming. Anyways, that was kind of my, and now I've got it. And now I tell my boys every time I see it, whenever we're driving, they're beating me to it now. But for years, I would say, "Oh, and there's Mount Rainier." And guess what? They're like, "Yeah, we know you summited Mount Rainier," and now they're saying it ahead of me. So maybe in their mind they'll go do it themselves.
Yeah.
But I think this parallels, right? I mean, this kind of thing, right? The preparation, all this. I mean, you run your own business, right? You have your own business. And there's so many challenges, but I'd love to hear from you. Can you see some parallels from doing something that really, on its face, doesn't seem like it has anything to do with your business or running your own business? Is there one or two things that come to mind?
Yeah. So again, I love that question. The structure. I think having structure really makes a huge difference. But running your own business comes with just as you mentioned, multitude of challenges. I think the business development space is such a huge challenge nowadays. Global workforce, there's more folks who are getting into consulting. I think that there is a lot of individuals who I think have got expertise, subject matter expertise that really should align and get together. But there's this unprecedented competition, I think,
Uh,
sometimes between organizations and individuals. And so call that kind of a state of pride, or maybe that there is a difference in vision and lack of alignment. But business development is always a huge challenge for small businesses, and whether you're selling sandwiches or you're selling consulting services, right? And so having somewhat of a structure really makes that process better, to be
yeah,
able to start defining who do I need to work with, and who's my ideal customer profile, right? My ICP. How do I continue to be creative, right? And that's the same thing with like scaling Mount Rainier. Now, I don't know what kind of weather you had during when you were scaling, but
perfect.
I lucked out. Yeah, see, I did too. And so you have to have that preparation and the mentality of like, what happens if this goes wrong, right? Or if it starts going wrong, what am I going to do to pivot and shift, right?
Yeah.
So these things have a lot of similar in parallel. And then you talked about exhaustion, right? Just feeling like that state of tiredness. I experienced the same thing. I actually was experiencing it quite heavily on the way down.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah,
Like I was
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I felt like I was impacted by it far more going down than uphill, right? So, if we think of an analogy, everyone thinks that the uphill is the battle, but downhill is just as much of the battle as uphill, right? And being cognizant and aware of that. So when you're running a business, right, let's say you're developing everything, and you're creating a structure for how you're going to go and execute with the business and how you're going to go align in your business. But then there's the tail end, which is like the aspect of continuing work, or the customer retention, or the project success, right? Once you're done with something, there's that whole vision of how do you help the customer, and how do you do it in such a way that's going to help your business as well once that thing is executed. Because
Mm.
again, it's that mentality is just because you hit the top of the peak doesn't mean you're done, right? You're not done. That's kind of the middle of the road, right? You're halfway there
Yeah, once you've
before you.
hit the goal or your target, then you got to deliver. You got to, that's the down. Is like you got to deliver. You got to finish the project. You got to finish Anyway, sorry, I like the analogy
Yeah,
of the down part too.
yeah. So I think that's kind of, there's all these things when we do our hobbies. There's a lot of parallels in the midst of the persistence, the structure, the cadence, the practice, right? Being able to understand that there's a beginning and then there's an end, right? And what those cycles look like, right? And establishing that, how does that work for you? How do you execute against that? And the mentality, and I love that you brought this up, is like we all have failures that we experience or we've been a part of or we've done ourselves, how do we learn from that? And how do we pivot from that? How do we get better, right? How does that strengthen us? And then how do we share that to those around us? Not just close it in and house it to ourselves,
Yeah.
but how do we share that to those and show that we want to develop more trust? We want to develop a better way of thinking about things because, again, our methodology might change. It might be incompatible with whatever we're wanting to execute against, right? And that quick recognition to be able to say, here's a problem, I need to solve for it, right? I'm already seeing a rock starting to break on that, Mount Rainier. Is it going to fall down my pathway? Is there going to be an avalanche, right? Is it going to come down my pathway? What am I going to do, right? What am I going to do in that sense?
Yeah. This is
So,
good. I want to touch on something you talked about where there's this competition, and this happens, I think, and it does play I think, to the summiting also. But there's this feeling that there's not enough, so I've got to kind of get my own. I've got to be able to get my business. There's not enough for all of us, but there's more than enough business out there. There's more than enough opportunities out there. In fact, I think it grows when you start collaborating, when you start teaming up with people and certain leverage. And in fact, nobody succeeds alone.
mm-hmm.
Nobody succeeds. There's no way I come up with that top of that mountain without the team of people and my buddy who helped encourage me along the way. I helped keep his attitude up, and then by being this goofy dude slobbering his way up to the top and making them laugh. So I was the humor, unintentional humor, but that's okay. But there's more than enough opportunity out there. There's so much competition in speaker coaching and presentation coaching. There's so much in the personal development space. But there's so much more business still to be out there because your personality, my personality will connect with a different group of people. And in fact, if we leverage each other's collective skills and support each other, we'll actually grow faster, I believe. And so part of the reason for this whole call is just to connect with people and leverage, and I hopefully can help you, and that might be a good transition, but hopefully I can help you grow your business and grow what you do, and you can help me be better and affect other people as well. And so if someone wants to connect with you, right, there's a lot of great stuff that we shared today. If someone wants to connect with you, what is the best way to do that? Is it LinkedIn, or what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, they can email me directly at alan@thechannelmethod.com. Feel free to take a look at my website, which is www.thechannelmethod.com. I've got some use cases that I've placed on there. And I do appreciate this, and I think it's vice versa as well. I think this is a perfect example. I don't want to use this as an example of one of those partnerships, right? Where I think about partner ecosystems. We're two partners, right? We've got two different things that we kind of focus on and we're subject matter expertise in. Why not work with each other and leverage each other, right? And we're creating that ecosystem of our own. By doing that, it just strengthens us and makes us better. We start coming to recognize, I'm not great at this. David's here. Let me connect you. Let's rock and roll. And then we have, shared conversations such as things that work and things that don't work. And so for those individuals who do want to connect with us, I think, we should reach out to us, and email or LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me.
Awesome. Alan, this has been great. This conversation went a lot longer than I anticipated. That's like bullet points of some talking points, and we'll see. And Alan, you are a great conversationalist. I'm so glad that we had this time. If you all want to reach out to him, obviously reach out to him at thechannelmethod.com. Is that correct?
That is.
Yep.
And then David, how do folks get a hold of you?
Oh, they can go to the Ace Your Presentation, and they can follow me there or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for that help there. That was great.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I'm going to share this out too.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. LinkedIn or Ace Your Presentation is probably a good one. David at aceyourpresentation.com. But stay tuned for the next show. I get a chance. I think it's going to be Thomas Hickson's going to be the next person. And so I'm fired up. But Alan, thanks so much. We'll see you later. And I hope you all ace your life.